I love it when we kick off a new small group semester. Literally one of my most favorite times of the whole year. Small groups are such a big deal in our faith story. You know, it's more than just hanging out with friends. It's really a huge way that God develops us into the people he wants us to be. Sometimes though, let's be honest, they can go wrong. So tonight we're going to chat about what makes and keeps a small group great. When I was in high school, I was in a small group. Literally some of my best friends on the planet. We shared a ton of fun times together. Amusement parks, concerts, movie nights, service projects, a lot of the same stuff that we still do today in small groups. Think David and Jonathan. You guys remember David, right? He's a guy the Bible talks about a lot. The guy who killed Goliath, he had a pretty bad screw up with Bathsheba, wrote most of the Psalms. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible about him. And in 1 Samuel 18, we see that David has a best friend, Jonathan. Now, there's tons to unpack there. We could do an entire series just on their friendship. But suffice it to say, David and Jonathan definitely lived like they were in a small group together. Loads of fun. There were some tough times in their friendship too, though. I mean, at one point, Jonathan's dad was super jealous of David and wanted him dead. And while that level of drama never hit up in my small group, we carried each other's burdens and we didn't have to carry those alone because we had friends in our small group. Small groups should be a place where we find support, strength, help, a place where we can be our true, authentic selves, knowing that the people there care about us, pray for us, know us. Galatians 6:2 says it like this: share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. First, check this out. That verse comes straight after a verse talking about being overcome by sin. So it's not just talking about tough times we share. It's also talking about being vulnerable enough, honest enough to share the struggles that maybe no one even knows we have. And also, what's the law of Christ? Share each other's burdens and in this way fulfill the law of Christ? What even is that? Well, you can find that in Mark 12, verses 30 and 31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the law of Christ. In other words, when we share each other's burdens, when we carry the load, when we live in community and care with each other, we are loving God and we are loving our neighbors, which is really what the whole Jesus life is boiled down to in the end. Now, here's the rub. We're human. So sometimes people in our group screw up. They make a joke. They tease too hard. They share something outside the group that should have stayed inside the group. They don't participate or they're goofing off when we're trying to be serious. You know what I remember most in my small group? An egregious breaking of trust. I had shared something really personal about my family with someone in my small group. It wasn't something dangerous or reportable, just something really personal. And my friend not only shared it with our entire small group, but he told people outside our small group. And I was devastated because small groups, in order to work, have to be safe groups. Now listen, I don't mean like blood oath, ride or die, you'll never get it out of me kind of groups. If something is shared that's dangerous or life-threatening or bigger than you can handle on your own, of course, you need to share it with a trusted adult. But generally speaking, there have to be some ground rules on what makes a group a really good group. Things like privacy, respect, care, fun, like core qualities, the things that guide the small group moving forward. Do you know why David and Jonathan's small group worked so well? Here's why. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. You can find that in 1 Samuel. They made a covenant. Now, don't worry, we aren't taking off our clothes in this group, but that means a lot more than we might think it does. First, we said a little earlier that Jonathan's dad wanted David dead. Why? Because Saul, Jonathan's dad, was king, but David was super popular, so Saul was feeling pretty insecure, like David might stage a coup and overthrow his government. But because we know Jonathan's dad was the king, what's that mean about Jonathan? It means he was the prince, the next to the throne, the next king. So when Jonathan gave David his robe, it was big, like think Queen Elizabeth giving her crown to someone in her small group as a symbol of their friendship. Huge, gigantic. Jonathan's robe as a symbol of the covenant was a massive show of trust, care, and commitment. Covenant. Almost like saying, my spot in the royal family does not matter to me more than our friendship does. And then giving him all the protective gear, his sword, his belt, and all that stuff, that was a pretty huge statement too. Jonathan was pretty much saying, this covenant, this commitment we're making to each other is deep enough that I will protect it at all costs. And here's all my protective equipment to prove it. Jonathan and David basically did the Blood Brothers thing without the knives or the blood. They were committed. Their bond was strong. Their transparency with each other was bold. They knew how to do small group. So how do we build a group bond like the one David and Jonathan had? How do we avoid disappointments like the one I had in my high school small group? We make a covenant. We keep all our clothes on, no exchanging of crowns or anything, but we do spend some time deciding what our core qualities are. And then we seal those in. David and Jonathan had a very symbolic exchange showing that they were committed to the core values of their group. So let's take a minute and start thinking through some of those foundational principles that matter most to you. Things like respect while others are sharing, dialing it in when important words are being spoken, confidentiality when lives aren't at risk, serving the community together. And let's spend some time together as small groups, building out our covenants together. And then let's seal them in.